Hello boys and girls, welcome to my channel. I'm the Obscure Joe PT, and for today what we have in here it is the Dark Souls Remastered. So the Dark Souls Remastered was developed by the From Software, and I think this remastered version was entirely developed by the Keylock. The engine is still the same engine of the first Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. And as you can see, according by the MSI Afterburner, we are now playing the game at 60 frames per second with no mods required. So for the settings, I'm running the game at 1080p 60 frames per second. You can personalize many stuff in here, like borderless, full screen. You have a VSync option. Unfortunately, it's a double buffered one. Anti-aliasing, you can select off FXAA or TAA. You have two cosmetic options like motion blur and depth of field for the people that actually don't like these effects, and the only graphical setting option you get, it is, well, ambient occlusion. Okay, so I decided to test the game since the first bonfire after the crown sequence until the Demon Taurus or Towers Demon or whatever the name. So I made a path to there with the maximum settings at 1440p and 1080p. And these are the results. So at 1080p I was able to sustain 60 frames per second with no issues whatsoever, and 1440p I was able to sustain those 60 frames per second with a couple of drops here and there. Okay, so yeah, 1440p looks playable, but unfortunately, despite we have some of the drops from 60 frames per second to 50s, not all the good things are good news. And yeah, I have a lot to talk about this remaster in this video, so I guess I even going to get tired of talking because there is a lot of stuff to get covered in here. First of all, this is probably the least concern of my own, but this game it is locked to 60 frames per second, whatever you feel if you are using VSync or not. So I think this is a lost of opportunity to Keylock or From Software, because most of the PC, not most, but a lot of PC gamers are starting to adopt high refresh rate screens like 120 Hz screens and 144. So it's a little bit unfortunate to see this game locked at 60 frames per second. For me, this is a no issue at all. For me, 60 frames per second, it is fine for this game. I have no problem with this game being locked at 60 frames per second. But for high refresh rate screens users up here, this might be like a stupid decision, you know. So the second issue for me, and this one is probably one of the biggest issues with this game, is that you need to play this game at 60 frames per second. Okay, you might be thinking, what? But what do you mean? What I mean is that this game don't support frame skipping, which means that you either play this game at 60 frames per second or either you don't. Okay, because if you don't play this game at 60 frames per second, for example, like my 1440p experience where I got drops to 50 frames per second, what happens is the game starts to run in slow motion, and it's not the typical drop in frame rate that you get in most games. What you get is a slow motion experience with the logic of the game completely broken. So to give you a stupid example how it happens is, let's imagine that you played one of your favorite songs for 100 times or 1,000 times before, and you go to the YouTube, type the name of your favorite song and adjust the the video speed to 0.75%. So the voice will start to get different, the beating is getting slowed down, so everything seems not normal with the song, right? Logically. So it's exactly the same thing that happens in this remaster if you don't play at 60 frames per second. And I'm not talking about the sound, I'm talking about the entire animations, the entire physics. Everything gets weird and slowed down, everything seems completely out of place. So like I said, either you play this remaster at 60 frames per second, either you play this remaster at 60 frames per second, or either you don't play it. And this is a bad news, because there were people that were playing Dark Souls 1 around, that were playing at 30 frames per second, but they were stressing around their PC a lot, and they might not be able to play this remaster at 60 frames per second. So this is completely bad news for all these users, and I think this is, yeah, it's a stupid decision to have the game logic bound to the game, but I'm going to assume This is the way that the game was developed, and you can't change it at all. I understand that Keylock couldn't made anything about it at all, but at least they could offer an option at the beginning of the game for you to select, okay, so my PC can't handle 60 frames per second, so I'm going to select the game logic to be bound at 30 frames per second, just like the original. Or for the PC users like us that can handle 60 frames per second at 1080p, oh okay, I want to play at 60 frames per second, my PC can handle, so I'm going to select 60 frames per second. So I think they could go on with an option for 30-60 frames per second for the users with, with weaker PCs, but no. You are completely restricted to 60 frames per second, and for me that is really stupid. And for all the users that are considering buying Dark Souls right now, all I want to say is if you are not 100% aware if you are going to get this game at 60 frames per second, this is going to be really bad news, because you can no longer get the original game. Yeah, of course, you can get the game by piracy, but if you want to play online, you can't do it with a pirated copy, of course. And unfortunately, you don't have any more options, because the original game was removed from Steam and from the stores, and you just can't buy this new remastered version where 30 frames per second is a no option in this game because it doesn't exist. Okay, like I said, you are forced to play at 60 frames per second. Okay, the second thing that really pisses me off a lot with this game is that we had a lot of remasters before, like Skyrim, BioShock, and I'm not going to say that they are perfect games, but they were games that were successfully released with a lot of bugs, but they were functional. There was no big issues whatsoever with Skyrim, BioShock, or many other remasters that were released, or the original. So what happens is Skyrim, BioShock and other games did release their remaster for free for the owners of the original games. So Dark Souls 1 were a completely broken mess on the PC, and for the owners of the original game, if they don't apply the DS Fix mode, it's still a broken game. So the minimum that I think that From Software could have done, it was to offer this remaster to the original owners of the original game, okay? But no, they decided to ask money, because the game costs $40, which I think it's ridiculously high. It's ridiculous, to be honest. And the only thing they gone for is a discount of 50% if you want to get the remaster because you are the owner of the original. I think this is really stupid, because $20 is still a high value for this game if you own the original, because I'm pretty sure that you played a lot the original game, online or not. And with $20 you can buy multiple games on Steam and more recent ones. So I don't understand this decision. I think actually, by the state that the original game was released on the PC, offering this game for free, this remastered version, was the minimum thing to go for, and I think they could still maintain the original game as an option, and for example, you could cycle between the original game or the remaster, but no, they removed entirely the original game from the store, and you can only buy the remastered version now if you want. This is a rumor, what I'm going to say, but this is one of the other things that I'm very concerned, because during the Dark Souls 2 release, there was two versions. There were the Scholar of the First Sin version, and there was the Dark Souls 2 version. And these two versions couldn't communicate between both of them. And I think the same happens in this game. So if you have friends that played Dark Souls 1 and that you need to ask them for help to beat the boss or something like that, or a cooperative, or going online with them, and if they own the original game and you own this remastered version, rumor has it that you can't play with your friends, because this remastered version can communicate with the original one. If you know anything about it, just leave a comment. On the comment section, because this might get helpful. This might be helpful for the users that are watching this video and might find a confirmation about it. Okay. So there is a lot of issues with this game. VSync is double buffered too, so it's not a great decision. So if you get a drop from 60 frames per second, you will get to 30 frames per second in a second. So there is a lot of stuff that is wrong with this remaster. Community is giving a mixed up results to this game on the Steam community. It seems that people are complaining about save files getting corrupted, a lot of hackers on the online. So I think this remastered version is probably not the remaster that we deserved. I think they could work a little bit better on this remaster. The remaster should communicate with the old version. VSync could be triple buffering. This game could have variable frame rate, or at least they could offer an option between 30 to 60 frames per second, and not only 60 frames per second. And they could simply allow people to buy the old version instead of being forced up to buy the remastered version. So not everything it is good about this remaster. The only thing good that I could say is that it's much better optimized. The game now it is much more multi-threaded, so things like Blight Town and stuff like that, even with powerful PCs of today with DSFix with 60 frames per second, it was a pain in the ass to run. And apparently right now Blight Town it is very easy to run with in this version, either on the PC or either on the console. So there was a very good optimization on this remaster, but unfortunately not all the things are good news, and unfortunately Dark Souls Remaster comes up with a lot of issues that is pissing up the community. Okay, so guys, that's all that I want to talk about this Dark Souls Remaster. Hope you keep enjoying the rest of the boss fights, and I do hope to see you soon. Goodbye.